Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here to talk about Nino Rota, his serious side. And I put serious in quotation marks because I'm not sure that Rota really had a serious side. I mean, in the strict sense of the term. Who was Nino Rota, aside from the guy who wrote the film scores to Godfather Part 1 and 2, as well as a zillion movies by Fellini and Zeffirelli and Visconti? Yeah, he did all that stuff. He was absolutely insanely prolific. His dates were, let's see here, 1911 to 1979. And boy, is he taken for granted. First of all, because he's Italian, and unless you're an avant-garde, squeak bloop, kind of crazy person, nobody takes you seriously if you're an Italian composer. And second of all, because his serious music is overshadowed by his work in film. And I really think it's a terrible thing that film composers don't get any credit because, first of all, a lot of them write fabulous music, even though it's for the film. I mean, it's incidental music. We like Peer Gynt. We like L'Arlésienne. We play the Carmen Suite. All of that really qualifies as film music, as it would be today. And the suites he's arranged from his film scores are absolutely marvelous. And we'll talk about a few of them. But, I just find it depressing that a composer of this kind of skill and personality and characterfulness doesn't get any attention. A few years back, people started recording his serious music. And, disc after disc came out. There's a 12 CD Decca series of Nino Rota orchestral music. 12 CDs, 6 2-CD sets. I mean, really kind of remarkable because there are 3 symphonies, there are concertos for everything. And we'll talk about that in a minute. A couple of piano concertos, a couple of cello concertos. There's the concerto for strings, which is quite well known, at least as far as anything that he wrote is well known. It's wonderful, wonderful music. He was totally eclectic. His style is relentlessly tonal for the most part. He occasionally had a dodecaphonic excursion, but for the most part, his music is charming and amusing and entertaining and somewhat neoclassical or neo-romantic in style. It's melodic because as an Italian composer, it helps if you can write tunes. People expect it, and if you're good at it, you really ought to just cut loose and let it happen. So I just want to show you some recordings and then play you some samples. I mean, I don't want to dwell on this ridiculously. I'm just saying he's really a good composer. He deserves attention. And when I play these samples, I have a feeling you're going to agree. So one of the guys who always promoted Nino Rota's music was Riccardo Muti, who studied with him because he was director of the conservatory in Bari, Italy. And Muti did a couple Nino Rota discs that were really quite wonderful. There was this one on Sony, which is absolutely great. It's got the suite from the ballet La Strada, about which more later, the concerto for strings, and the suite, the ballet from the film Il Gatto Pardo, the leopard. That's a gatto pardo, a spotted cat. Get it? The leopard. Then we have another Muti disc on EMI. I guess this will come out in the Muti big box that's coming, hopefully. I'm really curious to see what EMI Warner forgets about. Nino Rota sounds like a good person that's going to be forgotten. But, if you're going to forget somebody, this is a good candidate. Not because it's not good, but because nobody will remember. Because he's just not big enough for people to pay attention to. But this contains his 2 piano concertos with Giorgio Tomasi. I mean, really, really cool. 2 of the piano concertos, the Piccolo Modo Antico. Actually, that's his 3rd piano concerto, I think. I don't know. There's a bunch of them. And they're lovely and lots of fun to listen to. They really are. I mean, really enjoyable. And then there's like a couple of discs on Bis. You've got the symphonies. And this disc contains what? Symphony number 3 and the Concerto Festivo, which is a concerto for orchestra, which is really, really cool because, he was writing concertos for orchestra as, in the style, not the style of Bartok and Kodály and those people, but he was one of those guys who wrote dazzlingly for the orchestra. He's a film music guy. He knew what he was doing. And then let's see, what else do we get? La Molière Imaginaire. That's another one of his ballets. Really delicious music. Absolutely wonderful. Molière Imaginaire. Then there was a whole series of discs on Chandos, which, of course, they still haven't figured out. Like, box them up and release them. That would be a good thing. Because here we have, again, La Strada. That's very popular. And the Sinfonia, the Symphony on a Love Theme. That's such a pretty piece, as you might expect. 27 minutes long. It's serious stuff. And the waltzes from The Leopard, that disc. And then on this one, you get premiere recording of his piano concertos, the 2 piano concertos. They're actually 3, but because one of the ones on the Muti discs is not on here. But these are the 2 piano concertos, the ones that are just called piano concerto, not piccolo modo antico or whatever the heck that other thing is called. But again, they're absolutely delightful. And this has the 2 cello concertos, which is like, wow. He wrote 2 cello concertos and a lot of other things besides. And there are many other discs. In addition to the 6-album, 12-disc Decca set, there's a Harmonia Mundi disc. But one of the most popular pieces that he wrote is La Strada. And I want to play you a little bit of it because there's a wonderful recording here on ATMA that I have permission to use featuring, before he became big, Yannick Nézet-Séguin, also known in the classical music biz as Nazgul Snezek-Yegin. If you're a fan of Lord of the Rings and perhaps The Princess Bride, you get Nazgul Snezek-Yegin. But no, his real name is Yannick Nézet-Séguin. And now, of course, he's just big, really big. He conducts the Philadelphia Orchestra. He conducts the Met. He does a radio show on WQXR called Sundays with Yannick, where he basically spends an hour talking about himself, which is something that artists are so good at. But he's a very talented conductor. And this disc is with his own Orchestre Métropolitain du Grand Montréal, or, as they say, the Metropolitan Orchestra of Greater Montreal. And that was a good group. He did, it's very interesting how Nézet-Séguin's career took off. He basically established on the map, on the recorded map, this orchestra, which originally was a community orchestra type thing. And he gave them a name, and it made his career doing wonderful first-class work. And from there, he began to be in demand as a conductor of the more established ensembles because his gifts as an orchestra builder and an interpreter were quite evident early on, and they are in this wonderful disc. Now, I have to tell you, be forewarned, La Strada was also coupled with Kurt Weill's Second Symphony on a different disc, which isn't nearly as good. If you're curious about this and you want to get it, get the All Rota disc, because this gives you La Strada and his harp concerto, which is gorgeous. I love harp concertos. I'm a sucker for harp concertos. And his trombone concerto, which is also just delightful and so smartly planned. We'll talk about that. But first, I'm going to play you the opening of La Strada because you'll get a good sense of it. Now, just before we begin here, La Strada was a ballet he wrote after a film by Fellini. He did the score to the Fellini film, and then he wrote a ballet on the same topic, which incorporated some of the music from the film and a lot of other music besides, including quotations of other famous classical pieces, which led to accusations of Rota being eclectic. God forbid. Oh, no, we mustn't have eclectic. But it's really a wonderful piece. Good half-hour, serious chunk of music because he extracted a symphonic suite. And why this isn't programmed, why don't orchestras play this music every 15 minutes? I have no clue. Here's the opening. It's just a kick-ass opening. you know you're in for a good time, right? And in the second movement, he has a rumba, a honest to goodness, wonderful rumba. This has got a tune, one of those tunes that you can't get out of your head. It gets stuck there. But the fascinating thing about it is that it's never the same twice. And if you listen to it carefully, you'll realize that every time that this tune comes around, it goes a slightly different way, but it always sounds the same in your head. It's fascinating. I would love to do a psychological study on the tune of the rumba from La Strada. Listen to this. You'll see exactly what I mean. The second phrase, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, that phrase, it's different every time it comes around and sends the harmony careening off in another direction. But, oh, God, it's wonderful. Here, listen to this. Now, the composer who could write that is a certifiable genius. Anyway, Rota also sort of gets some guff thrown in his direction because he was unbelievably prolific. I mean, insanely prolific. Aside from all this orchestral music, the 12 discs of it or whatever, he wrote over 150 film scores. Some years he wrote several a year. I mean, he wrote 10 in 1 year in the 1950s. He just churned it out. In addition to piano works and chamber works and lots of choral music and all kinds of stuff. So, he's one of those prolific guys who people, because his style was very eclectic and mostly very easy on the ear, people assume should not be taken seriously, which is always the wrong assumption because they assume it without listening to what he wrote. All of these generalizations, 9 times out of 10, I'm just telling you, when you're looking at music about a certain composer, a lesser known composer, and you start seeing criticisms, I'm not saying they're all great or the music is all great, but criticism should be informed. It should be based on having actually heard the music in question. And especially these days, most people don't read from score. Even the people who do read from score don't know what things really sound like. Some things it's impossible to get a picture of from a score, like a ballet or an opera, because they depend on sympathetic staging and great performance. You just can't know. You just can't know how good or bad it is until you play it or until it's been recorded. And until recently, most of Nino Rota's serious music, his abstract orchestral works, weren't recorded at all. So nobody could say whether he was good or bad or indifferent. And 90% of the literature on him that's out there predates these recordings. And a lot of the literature since is written by people who haven't heard them. And so what could you possibly learn of value from that? Nothing. As a classic example of this, check out the opening of the Harp Concerto. The Harp Concerto is just beautiful. I mean, even if you are not like me, absolutely quelling whenever a new Harp Concerto shows up, this is just a lovely work and sensitive and so beautifully attuned to the timbres of the solo instrument and the things it does well. The opening that I'm going to play, it's magical. It's enchanting. It's enchanting without having to just do lots of swooshy glissandos and special effects. It's enchanting melodically and timbrally. It's so smartly designed. Here you go. Isn't that beautiful? Who's the harpist? She's really good. Jennifer Swartz. And she's a heck of a decent harpist. And then a little bit of the trombone concerto. The trombone player here is Alain Trudel. And one of the things about brass concertos is that they tend to be rather brief. This trombone concerto is only 12 minutes long. And that's a good thing. Why? Because, frankly, how long can you listen to a trombone or a trumpet for that matter? The timbre of brass instruments gets tiring rather quickly. And second of all, the players only have a limited lung capacity. There's only so much air before their lungs and lips start to give out. Although today, with their monster technique, they could probably go on forever using rotary breathing. And, the music could continue after they go home. It doesn't even make any difference anymore. But this is just such, again, a wonderful piece created with such a keen awareness, not just of the timbre of the instruments, but its expressive possibilities and its possibilities for just a little good-natured clowning. Here is a touch of the finale of the trombone concerto. Now, if these examples don't make you want to run out and grab some Nino Rota, I have no idea what more I could possibly do. This is wonderful, wonderful music, and you'll have a very, very good time going through these pieces. They're not all equally great, obviously. Some of his stuff is stronger than others. You may find the symphonies, for example, a little bit facile and not quite symphonic enough. He's more like Poulenc as a symphonist when it comes to that kind of music, not terribly serious, light in tone, but who cares? It's fun and incredibly enjoyable to listen to. So keep on listening, folks. Thank you for joining me for this really quick, short, fast, dirty, down and dirty, sort of run through the work of Nino Rota. There's more there than The Godfather. Take care. Thank you.